You know, in general, I really am an advocate for DIY projects, but uh, whoever did this, please stop. Stop. Never touch a car again. Never. Jesus Christ, like, who does this? Welcome to Dirt, Sweat, and Gears and the Tales of Transportative Travesty. This week we're working on the Jeep, and as you can tell, it's a little bit cloudy and rainy, and it's actually pretty cold. But here in Southern California, it doesn't stay cold for long. So we are going to try to recharge the AC system. If you've been watching my Jeep videos a few months ago, I had to discharge the AC system in order to replace the heater core. And well, that caused a little bit of controversy because, in my opinion, replacing the heater core in this Jeep, it was not that big of a deal. The whole Jeep community, I guess maybe they didn't watch my video, or maybe they've only ever worked on Jeeps before, but they all say that replacing a heater core on the Jeep is the worst thing I've ever had to do. It's the worst thing in the world. Oh God, it's such a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna bother. I'm done. I'm not arguing. You think it's the worst thing in the world? It's the worst thing in the world on a Jeep Wrangler. Anyway, now that that's all done, I have working heat, but I do not yet have working air conditioning. Here's the catch. I've never done this before. So, naturally, I did what everyone else does. I go on YouTube, and there is an incredible video by Chrisfix. You should go watch it if you want to learn how to recharge an AC system. His video is incredible. All of his videos are amazing. He is a much better YouTuber than me, and he actually knows what he's doing, unlike me. So if you want to know how to do it, go watch his video. If you want to watch an idiot try to figure it out, keep watching here. The first thing we have to do is we have to, well, buy the stuff. And I've actually already bought the stuff, but since it's a little bit raining, it's not like out here all on display or whatever. We're just going to bring it out as we need it, and we're going to bring it back in. And at any point, we have to be ready to bail on this whole operation. If it starts pouring, which it probably won't, we have to get ready to just bring it back in. First thing we have to do is hook up the manifold vacuum set and the vacuum pump to check vacuum on the system to make sure we don't have any leaks. Spoiler, I've already done that. We don't have any leaks, but we do have the Miata, which supposedly does leak. So after we finish with the Jeep, we know that I can do this successfully. We have to, as our next project, try to figure it out on the Miata, which does leak. Now, I haven't seen any videos, at least not yet, showing you how to diagnose a leak. So that's going to be something that I get to figure out the hard way, and I will be sure to bring you on that journey. First things first, let's open this hood, get the vacuum set up on this Jeep. Okay, I've done dumber things, but I can bring you in underneath this little tent I've created. First thing you do is you pull a vacuum. The idea is that you hook up these things to your high and low side, and then you open them all with the pump running. You run it for a couple of minutes, and then you close these and then shut the pump off. And you just take a picture, come back in about 5-6 minutes, and make sure that the needles are still where they're supposed to be. Well, the needles are still where they're supposed to be. This is what they were at when I closed it off and shut the pump off. So we are good to actually charge the system. The next step after this is to start the pump back up, open this up again, and let it run for about 45 minutes. And the idea is that you're supposed to pull out all of the air and moisture from the system so that there's no contaminants in your AC system. And that's to prep it to refill. So let's do that next. We're going to start this back up. Open these up. And we're just gonna come back in a while. Hopefully it doesn't start pouring. Hopefully it doesn't leak through this tarp. So 45 minutes later, next thing we need to do is make sure we put the right amount of refrigerant in the Jeep. And the Jeep calls for 20 ounces. So that means we had to get 2 cans for 24 ounces, which means we need to leave out 4 ounces. So what does this weigh, including the can? 15.38. That means, let's double check that the other can is also the same weight. 15.34. I didn't touch it. It's up 15.38. All right. So that's good enough. So that means we're going to put this can in its entirety, and then this one, we are going to fill it until it reads 7.38 ounces. That means we have to start up the Jeep, put the AC on, put the cap on this refrigerant bottle, and we can begin to fill up the system. And so there's a reason why they say to wear gloves and safety goggles, and that is a very, very serious reason, because I was wearing gloves and safety goggles, and things went sideways. As you can see, something went wrong, and Freon started coming out of the bottle. It wasn't gushing out, but it was just, you know, just a little bit. And I think maybe this was down a little farther than it should have been. I should have double checked that it was all the way out, but the can's punctured, so I'm not taking that off. I am not sure what's going on there, but I am going to just put it in a bag and return it, get my money back. I can at least get some of my money back, but I am not going to mess with that. So this is one of those times where I'm looking outside at the rain, looking back at my project and what went wrong, and saying to myself, you know what? Sometimes it's just better to take the hint and come back another time. So I have to buy another one of these valves, because I am not touching that, because this may explode and send Freon all over the place, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to buy another one of those, buy another can, return that, and just come back and do this another time. Just another time, when it's not raining, another day. There's always another day. And I got to tell you, the refrigerant that came out of that, thankfully, I was wearing gloves, because that is serious business. You have probably 5 or 6 seconds with the gloves to get the situation contained and take off the gloves, because it was very, very, very cold. So yeah, I made a mistake, but I had the proper provisions, so I didn't hurt myself, thankfully. So we're going to come back another time. So for you, it's going to be just a split second, but for me, it's probably going to be a few days. See you in a few days. It has been a couple of days, and I decided to run vacuum for another 45 minutes just in case I did something really stupid, like not opening the engine side of the manifold system, which I may or may not have done. So I have actually confirmed that these are open now. This has been running for 45 minutes. These have been open, and we have vacuum. And it did hold vacuum over the last 4 days, so I know that we're going to be good here. So now let's get some gloves on and see if I can have air conditioning for the first time in 2 years. All right, check this out. So this is our manifold gauge set. I believe this is doing what it's supposed to be doing. You see the compressor clicking on and off. I have been weighing this, and so one of the things I made sure to do was to weigh both cans as I was putting them together. So I weighed the cans in without the nozzle, with the nozzle, and with the hose connected, and I tried as best as I could to get as close to 20 ounces of Freon R134 as I could. I think I'm very, very close, and to come inside of the vehicle, I can feel cold air coming out of here. So I think I am in good shape. It is nice and chill coming out of here. So we're gonna call that good, and I hope that I didn't put too much in. That's really my only concern here, is that I shut it off just a little bit too late. But again, I tried to get as close to 20 ounces as I could, and I used the scale, and that's as good as it can get. So next step is to return these cans so that I get my $10 deposit back and they can dispose of them properly. Pun intended, I can be a much more chill driver when I'm driving my Jeep. You know, this will really help me keep a cool head while I'm driving. So this is, I feel like it could be colder, but at the same time, that I just restarted the Jeep, so maybe a bit of driving, cycle the compressor a few more times, but this is definitely cold. This is definitely an improvement, and you know, like I said, hopefully I didn't overfill it, because that would suck. Hopefully I purged it correctly and didn't introduce air to the system. Pretty sure I'm okay there. The next car I'm gonna do it on is the Miata. The Miata, I am fairly certain the compressor will turn on. However, I am told there is a leak in the system, so we're gonna have to diagnose that together. Thankfully, our friend Chrisfix has a video on that as well, so we're gonna do that next. And I think we're gonna do that in this same video. I would really like to do it on the Prelude, but the Prelude has been an R12 system its entire life, and it has all of the R12 components still in it. So I would need to change a lot of things. I want to, but that's a different project for a different day, and that's going to be pretty expensive. So now we have cold AC running in the Jeep. We do have a little bit of an issue with the ducting, but I'm going to come back to that later. We're going to try this again on the Miata. So my wife is driving the Miata to work, and it's a 100-mile round trip, and it's starting to get warm, and she is melting. So we need to get this all done. Now, when I did the rebuild, I had replaced all of the AC components. I think the only things I didn't replace are the 2 Schrader valves, and the shop told me that there's a leak in the system. So first we're going to verify that claim, because I replaced all the systems. I replaced the O-rings, I replaced condenser, the compressor, the dryer, and the evaporator. I replaced everything. I spent a lot of money doing it. So there's no reason why this system should be bad. The only thing I can think of is maybe the Schrader valves are bad, which would not surprise me at all. But to validate that, we're going to hook up the gauges. All right, so the pump has been going for just about a minute, and we have our gauges just below 30. This is right where the Jeep was at when we tested it as well. So we're going to close these. And then we're going to shut the pump off. And we're going to come back in about 5 minutes and see if this needle moves. It's been about 5 minutes, and we are holding pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and close off these service ports, and then we're going to try again tomorrow. So last night I did a 2-hour vacuum pull before letting it sit. Now let's connect the service ports and see if this gauge wiggles around. We want it to be around here after things have been settled. Yeah, this is going to be a little hard to do with one hand, but we're opening the low side now. And now we're opening the high side. And you see, we have only gained. We have gained just a little bit of vacuum. This is awesome. That means that if this thing is leaking, I mean, there's no way the shop would have known. So either they assumed it and just wanted to get me out of there, or they did something wrong and it dropped for them. Because I just left this overnight and we are holding vacuum. So let's close everything up and then hook up our service feed line to a refrigerant bottle. Well, I got it up to about here, and it's not really clicking on. Nothing is clicking on, so I'm not sure if I need to put more pressure in it to get it to click on, or if I have an electrical problem. So I'm going to do a little bit of research. I'm probably, if I come up with a blank in the next, I don't know, 15 minutes, I'll come back out here and try this again. But that can still has at least half of its refrigerant still in it. So this is a little bit of a bummer, but I guess that's how it goes. So I'm looking through this system, trying to figure out why this might not be turning on, and I came to the pressure switch, and well, the person that converted this thing was obviously a complete dingling. And this time it wasn't me. So check out this harness. Pretty sure this pin is supposed to go in here in this slot, but it's only hanging on by like 1 or 2 strands. And then we've got this exposed wire over here. We've got this, oops. We've got this wonderful branch here that is also exposed. I mean, clearly this guy was an electrical engineer. I mean, who else would do something so brilliant? This goes nowhere. I could try to repin this, but it's so roached to begin with, and I am not very good at electrical myself. I'm getting better. But for 35 bucks to get a new harness, I'll take it. That's not that bad. So I found a new harness on eBay for 35 bucks, and we're just going to replace this. It's just not worth screwing with. This appears to be a 91 to 93 line. This is a 134A connector system. It's not retrofitted. So good on him for doing that, for at least trying to swap in a 134 system. That does make my life a little bit easier in that regard. But this is why, dude. This is why the AC never worked. Because you suck at wiring. You really suck at wiring. If we've learned anything from the wiring for the ignition and for the fuel injectors, it's that you suck at wiring. So yeah, you suck at wiring. So all we have to do now is wait for this new harness. We're going to plug these back in where they're supposed to go. The harness out to the radiator, we're just going to wrap it up in tape and let it sit there, because this is already, I mean, I could connect this fan to it, but why if they're already both running all the time? I actually prefer it to both be running all the time, because when you're sitting in traffic in 110-degree heat, you want your radiator to be cool. So this is cheap insurance. Now that is more like it. Let's install this thing, hook up our manifold gauges, and see if the compressor turns on. Okay, well, I ran it for a few minutes, and the pressure stayed right here, just under 80. And that was just the pressure from the bottle itself. The compressor did not turn on, but that is enough pressure that the compressor should kick on. So this is really interesting. So I have the new harness connected properly into the new relay. I did test that the fan, in fact, does get current, so that's a good thing. But so I did some research, and if you remember from our test, this was the fan out for the auxiliary fan when the air conditioning is on. That was getting power. And according to the diagram, if I'm reading it correctly, this is just before the pressure switch, which is right there. So we got power here, which means power reached the pressure switch, potentially. And that means that this pressure switch could be bad. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to unhook this guy, jump it, and see if the compressor kicks on. If the compressor does not kick on, that means that it could be the wiring to the compressor, or it could be the compressor itself. I don't think it's the compressor itself. It's brand new. I'm going to look at the gauges in a second, but right now we're going to jump the switch, and I'm going to show you what happens. It's actually quite obvious. You hear that? So you heard that. Now we're going to look at the manifold gauges. So what does that tell us? That tells us two things. Number one, my belt is loose. Number two, the pressure switch is not engaging. So either the pressure switch is bad or it's not correct for this setup, or I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but something is going on with this pressure switch, which the only bummer to that means I'm going to have to go to shop to have the Freon evacuated. But that's okay, because that means we can start over, replace this pressure switch, and most likely have a working car. I have the new pressure switch installed, and as you can see here, I had to splice the connectors because this was a more generic pressure switch and it did not have the exact same connector. That's not really a big deal at all. And I also took the opportunity to replace the Schrader valves while I was in there, just in case, because it's better to just replace them now that the system's open rather than to have a leak later on. So let's go take a look at the old Schrader valve and the old pressure switch. All right, I think this is really going to help build the story and kind of figure out what happened along the way. Now, this is the old pressure switch. As you can see, I just cut the wires here because I really didn't care. I was removing it, it was going to get thrown out. But you can see here, if I can get my damn camera to focus, you can see just how rounded off the sides of this thing was. Now, I did add a little bit of rounding on my own, but it was pretty bad to begin with. You can also see that this has an old black rubber seal on here. So this is probably the original, at least if not to the car, to those lines. Now I'm looking at this next to the harness I removed, and I think I know what happened. So when he was doing the AC work, he swapped over an R134A AC system, and he knew that the pressure switch was bad. So he tried to charge it, and then it wouldn't take a charge, and then he realized the pressure switch was bad. So he went to go replace it and ended up rounding it off. This was pretty much impossible to take off by hand. I actually used my impact with a socket on it in order to remove this thing without damaging the line too much. You see, turning it by hand, it was really hard to get in there, first of all, and because it was really hard to get in there, it was really hard to control the flexing of the hose as I was trying to remove this. But with an impact, it was just, you know, giving little bits of impact at a time rather than a long, you know, torque. So it eventually came out much quicker and did much less damage to the line. So he realized the switch was bad, and also then could not remove the old switch. So he started trying to bypass it by hacking up his harness. Obviously that failed too, because there was no AC and the compressor wouldn't kick on. So he failed to bypass the harness, failed to replace the pressure switch. So now that we've replaced these two parts, I am hoping that we will be able to have air conditioning. So coming back out here, I pulled vacuum again for another about roughly 2 hours. It's pretty cold because it's cloudy and it rained last night, so I don't know if I really want to try to recharge it today, but at the same time, I can at least pull vacuum and see if there's any leaks. So this is about where it was when I shut it off, which is pretty much where it was the last time I pulled vacuum. So that's a good sign. We're going to walk away from it for a while, see if it's still right here, and if it is, we're going to try to charge the AC, and hopefully this time the compressor will kick on. So we're done, and while I did record the entire process, including the mistakes I made, as well as the outro, I also included the biggest mistake I made, which was no audio for any of it. There was no audio. So I am going to talk about what I did, the mistakes I made, and how I recovered from them, and Well, you're just going to have to take my word for it that this is done and it works. It really does work. I don't have a thermometer, so I couldn't even tell you. I couldn't even show you if I wanted to. You can't feel things on video, so you will just have to take my word for it, unfortunately. But let me take you through my process because it was actually quite interesting. So I had the manifold gauges hooked up. I had pulled vacuum for 2 hours, and I was ready to go. So I hooked up my bottle, and I opened up the line, and I started to turn the bottle in to get refrigerant in the system, and then I realized that I forgot to purge before I opened up the line. You are supposed to purge that yellow line before you open up your manifold in order to remove all of the air from the yellow line. I didn't do that. So I quickly shut everything off, and thankfully I weighed the bottle and I had just enough left to continue on with this project without having to go get another bottle. So I got really, 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 really lucky. So I pulled vacuum again for another 2 hours and hooked it back up, purged the line that time, and I had just enough. Let me show you how I determined that. So over here you can see I have my notepad. I have a scale on top of my notepad, and I have a bunch of numbers written down. These are the weights of everything. So I did weigh this nozzle, and it came out to 2.75. I weighed the bottles when they were full. That's very, 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 very important. So it says there's 12 ounces in here, but obviously the can itself weighs something. So I wrote down what that is. I wrote down the actual weight of the bottles, 15.27, 15.38, and this determined the weight of the bottle that was not in refrigerant. Hypothetically, anyway. These bottles hypothetically weigh the same, so that usually is a better indicator that there is less refrigerant in here, but whatever, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I was at least had 20 ounces left between the two bottles, and I did. And so when I weighed this bottle, after filling it, I determined that there was about exactly an ounce left, which was perfect. So I have about 20 ounces in the system. I am really happy with that. It does blow nice and cold, and that is why it is very important to measure everything, and write it down. Make sure you write everything down on your notepad because you want to make sure you document everything as you go very clearly. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. I am really happy that for the cost of one AC service, I was able to diagnose, repair, and fill 2 cars. So that is the value of DIY. That is the value of just buying the tools and getting your hands dirty. That was really awesome, and I'm really happy that I was able to keep these 2 cars on the road running the right way. This Miata had a little bit more discovery work to do. Kind of a little bit of automotive archaeology happened here. Had to kind of dig into the car and figure out what the Neanderthals did back in the day to try to resolve some issue that had yet to be diagnosed. So it was really kind of a fun experience, really a fun journey to make that discovery, and really it was fun because it all paid off. There is one thing I have forgotten to do, and that was to tighten the belt. I'm going to do that in a future video where I have some random assortment of repairs and maintenance items to take care of. There's a few things that have piled up on this car since I took on this project, and we're just going to cover that in the next video. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And if you don't like what you see, maybe you're some kind of eco-terrorist and you think I should have filled this up with R12, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. That is it, and I will see you in the next video.